Okay, I want to start with a scene from our sources that I just can't shake. Picture this. The winter night, 500 years ago. An old man, 100 years old, is lying in bed. He takes a breath and just peacefully dies.
Which was, not a common thing to see back then, a peaceful death at that age.
Exactly. But the guy sitting next to him doesn't mourn. He doesn't pray. The moment the old man's heart stops, he stands up, pulls out a knife, and slices the body open.
It sounds so cold, doesn't it? Almost brutal. But for the man holding the knife, Leonardo da Vinci, this wasn't disrespect. It was a desperate need for an answer.
An answer to what?
To how a peaceful death works. He had to see the mechanics of it right then while the body was still fresh.
And that image, Leonardo with the knife, just obsessed with how things work, that's really the core of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We all know him for the Mona Lisa.
Sure. The Last Supper.
But the sources we've gone through paint a picture of someone who was so much more. Some historians actually rank him as the second most important human to ever live. Right after Jesus.
It's a huge claim, but you start to get it when you look at the sheer breadth of his work. He was a master in over 20 fields. We're talking anatomy, engineering, optics, robotics.
That's just wild. I feel good if I assemble an IKEA shelf and don't have parts left over.
Right. But here's the tragic part, and this is what we're really digging into. Despite predicting helicopters and understanding the human heart centuries before anyone else, Leonardo da Vinci died believing he was a complete and utter failure.
That's the part I can't wrap my head around. How does the man who basically invented the future die feeling like he wasted his entire life?
To get that, you have to go back to the beginning. Because he wasn't born a genius, he was born a nobody. April 15, 1452, in a little town called Vinci.
And Da Vinci isn't his last name, is it?
No, it just means from Vinci. He didn't have a surname. He was the illegitimate son of a peasant woman named Caterina, a bastard in the eyes of the law, and that status, right from birth, put a ceiling on his entire life.
And on top of that, he was left-handed. Today, who cares? But back then...
Back then, it was sinister. I mean, literally. The Latin word for left is sinistra. The church saw it as a mark of the devil. So you've got this illegitimate left-handed kid. All the doors to a formal education were just slammed in his face. No fancy schools for him.
Which you'd think would be a total disaster for someone with his mind. But the sources argue this was actually the best thing that ever happened to him.
It became his superpower. Since he couldn't learn from the old dusty books everyone else was reading, he had to go to a different teacher, nature. He became what he called a disciple of observation.
So instead of reading about a tree, he just went and stared at a tree.
For hours, for days, and he noticed patterns that nobody else saw. Like, have you ever heard of Leonardo's rule of trees?
I saw in the notes something about the thickness of the branches.
Yes. He figured out that if you take a tree trunk, its thickness is equal to the combined thickness of all the branches above it.
Wait, like exactly equal?
Exactly. It's a principle of flow. Nature doesn't waste anything. And once he saw that pattern in trees, he started seeing it everywhere, in rivers, in the blood vessels of the human body. He realized the world was built on a set of repeating engineering principles.
It's like he was seeing the source code of the universe.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that ability to see the code, that's what gets him an apprenticeship with Andrea del Verrocchio, a huge name in Florence.
And this leads to that famous story about the angel, right?
It does. They're working on a painting, The Baptism of Christ. Verrocchio lets his young apprentice paint one small angel in the corner.
A big mistake.
A huge mistake. Leonardo's angel was so lifelike, so real, it made his master's work look clumsy and flat. The story goes, Verrocchio put down his brush that day and never painted again.
Wow, so he's on his way up. He's this young, brilliant talent. But then, 1476, everything just comes crashing down.
The sodomy accusation. An anonymous tip accuses Leonardo and some other young men of relations with a 17-year-old boy.
And we need to be clear, this wasn't just a scandal. The punishment could be
burning at the stake. It was a death sentence. He only got off because one of the other guys had powerful family connections. But the sources are clear. This event scarred him. It was a huge psychological turning point.
He goes into hiding, in a way. He becomes secretive.
He withdraws completely. He realizes the world is dangerous. And that's when his notebooks become his entire world, his only safe space. But he starts writing in code.
The famous mirror writing.
Exactly. From right to left. It looks like nonsense unless you hold it up to a mirror. Now, some people say, oh, he was a lefty. He didn't want to smudge the ink.
Which, okay, is a practical argument.
It is. But when you look at what he was writing about, things that directly contradicted the Bible, it feels much more like self-preservation. One wrong person reading his notes on anatomy or geology, and he could have been executed for heresy.
And these notebooks are just chaotic. I mean, there are sketches for flying machines next to grocery lists, next to, well, bloodstains.
Yeah, that's the dark pattern the analysis mentions. He was often writing these notes while actively dissecting human bodies by candlelight.
Let's get into that, the anatomy. Because this, for me, is where he seems less like a genius and more like a time traveler.
He was a biological engineer. I mean, you have to remember, medicine at the time was all based on this ancient Roman doctor, Galen, who mostly dissected pigs.
So what was the official story on, say, the human heart?
Galen said the heart was a furnace. Its job was to heat the blood and fill it with vital spirit.
So Leonardo opens a body, takes one look at the heart and says, nope, not a furnace.
Not even close. But he did something brilliant. To understand how the valves work, he took an ox heart, filled it with hot wax to make a mold of the inside chambers.
That's clever.
And when he looked at the wax cast, he saw it immediately. The valves weren't for heat. They were mechanical gates. Check valves to prevent backflow. The heart wasn't a furnace, it was a pump.
And there was something else, right? Something about a vortex.
This part is just mind-blowing. He realized that for the main valve to close properly, the blood couldn't just rush through. It had to swirl to create a vortex. He figured this out by watching water flow in rivers.
Was he right?
100% right. But modern science, with all our technology, only confirmed that specific fluid dynamic in the 20th century. He saw it in the 1500s.
That's just, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And he did the same thing for the human spine.
Yep. He was the first person to accurately draw its S-curve. Everyone before him drew it as a straight pole. Leonardo realized a straight pole would snap. The S-curve is a spring, a shock absorber. He saw the body as a perfect machine of levers and pulleys.
So he's sitting on all this revolutionary knowledge. He even partners with a professor, a guy named Marcantonio della Torre, to publish an encyclopedia. This could have changed everything.
It would have jumped medical science forward by centuries. But in what becomes a pattern for him, tragedy strikes. The plague hits, della Torre dies, and the project is abandoned. Leonardo's discoveries get locked away in a trunk, lost for hundreds of years.
The curse of the genius. It's just heartbreaking. But he doesn't stop. He needs money. And this is where his story gets weird. He writes a resume.
The letter to the Duke of Milan, Ludovico Sforza. And he doesn't pitch himself as an artist. He knows his audience. He pitches himself as a weapons designer, a military engineer.
I read a summary of it. It's like 9 points about how he can build devastating bridges and chariots and cannons. And then at the very end, it's like, oh, and also I can paint a little.
He knew what the Duke wanted, so he designed some truly terrifying weapons. The most famous, of course, is the tank.
The armored turtle thing.
Exactly. A wooden saucer covered in metal with cannons pointing every direction. But there's a catch.
The gears, right. The blueprints show the gears are backwards.
They are. If you built it from his plans, the wheels would lock up. It wouldn't move.
So is that just a huge mistake?
Highly unlikely. This is the man who understood the mechanics of the heart. The theory is that it was a deliberate act of sabotage. A pacifist's failsafe.
He designed it to get the job, but built in a flaw so it could never actually be used against people.
That seems to be the consensus. He kept the fix in his own head. But not all his designs were sabotaged. The scythed chariot, that was just horrific. Rotating blades on the wheels, meant to slice through enemy soldiers' legs.
It's so hard to square that with a guy who would buy caged birds in the market just to set them free.
It's the duality of his life. He designed death to fund his studies of life.
And one of those great studies was his obsession with flight. He had that quote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward."
It was his ultimate obsession. But he started off on the wrong foot. He tried to mimic birds directly, designing these ornithopters.
The wing flapping machine.
Yeah, and they were doomed to fail. A bird's chest muscles are incredibly powerful for its body weight. A human just can't generate that kind of lift by flapping.
He had to pivot.
He did. He moved to phase 2, gliding. He realized it wasn't about flapping, it was about aerodynamics, about how air moves over and under a wing. His glider designs, when built today, actually fly.
And then came the aerial screw.
the great-grandfather of the helicopter, he realized a rotating screw could bite into the air and lift itself up.
Like a screw going into wood, but the wood is the air.
Exactly. The physics were perfect. The only thing he was missing was a lightweight engine to spin it fast enough. He was about 400 years too early for that.
He just kept running into the limits of his time. We haven't even talked about the robots.
The mechanical lion he built for the King of France. It walked across the room, and its chest popped open to reveal a bouquet of lilies.
And the robot knight. A suit of armor that could sit down and stand up on its own.
All run by internal pulleys and gears, centuries before anyone even thought of the word robot.
It's just so much. But we have to touch on the art because the sources are clear. For Leonardo, art and science weren't separate.
Not at all. They were the same thing. Art was just the final expression of his scientific observation.
Take the Last Supper. It's not just a religious scene for him.
No, it's a study in psychology. He wanted to capture that single explosive moment when Jesus says, "One of you will betray me." He wanted to paint the shock, the denial, the anger. He was painting human emotion as a science.
And the Mona Lisa's smile. That's science, too.
It's pure optics. It's his technique called sfumato, which means like smoke. He wrote that there are no lines in nature, only edges of light and shadow. So he blurred the corners of her eyes and mouth with dozens of layers of glaze.
So your eye can't quite focus on it, and it seems to change.
Precisely. Her expression isn't fixed. It's alive, emerging from the shadows. It's physics.
But despite all of this, the art, the inventions, the discoveries, his end is just so tragic.
It really is. He spends his last years in France. He's had a stroke. His right hand is paralyzed.
But he keeps working with his left.
He does. He's driven. But he knows time is running out. He's surrounded by thousands of pages of unfinished work, unproven theories.
And then he dies on May 2nd, 1519. And his final recorded sentiment was that he had offended God and mankind.
Because my work did not reach the quality it should have. That's what he believed.
It's just crushing. We see him as this monumental genius, and he saw himself as a failure.
Well, from his point of view, his tank was never built, his flying machine never flew, his anatomy book was never published. He just saw a pile of unfinished projects.
The sources bring up a modern diagnosis for this, right? ADHD.
And it clicks, doesn't it? The intense curiosity, the hyper-focus, the constant distraction, the inability to finish one thing because he's already fascinated by 10 new things. It was his gift, but it was also his curse.
So what's the takeaway here? We have this man who lived centuries in the future, died feeling like he failed, and yet here we are.
I think it's that his failure was just a failure of his time. The world wasn't ready. The technology didn't exist to bring his ideas to life. He wasn't wrong. He was just early.
500 years early.
Yeah.
You know, it's tragic, but it's also strangely comforting. If Leonardo da Vinci felt like he didn't accomplish enough, maybe the rest of us can cut ourselves some slack.
Or maybe the lesson is we need to redefine what accomplish means. We're obsessed with finishing the project, shipping the product. Leonardo was obsessed with the process of discovery.
The exploration itself was the point.
I think so. He taught us how to be curious.
Which leaves us with a pretty powerful question. If the greatest genius of all time died thinking he failed because he hadn't finished enough, maybe we should worry less about checking boxes and more about just observing the world around us.
Maybe just start by looking a little closer at the trees.
Definitely look at the trees. Thanks for diving in with us.
My pleasure.